Building a dam is one of the most ambitious engineering feats mankind has ever attempted. It's not just about holding back a river, it's about reshaping the very forces of nature. Think about it. Enormous walls of concrete and steel, towering hundreds of feet high, braced against the fury of rivers, collecting water to vast reservoirs. Structures so mighty, they light up cities, power industries, and irrigate farmlands for millions of people. But when it all goes wrong, when the structure built to conquer nature crumbles instead, the results can be nothing short of catastrophic. Today, we're diving into the world's most devastating dam disasters. We'll see how even the most massive structures can fail under pressure, what went wrong, and most importantly, what lessons were learned. Edenville, Michigan, a quiet community on the banks of the Tittabawassee and Tobacco Rivers. It's a kind of place where life moves slowly. But in May 2020, everything changed in an instant. For nearly 100 years, the Edenville Dam had held back Wixom Lake, a massive body of water created for hydropower back in 1924. Generating 4.8 megawatts of power, it was built as an earthen embankment dam, stretching 6,600 feet long and 52 feet high. The reservoir had a normal pool storage capacity of about 44 million cubic meters, making it a significant water source for the region. The following year, the Sanford Dam was constructed to control water levels and feed energy to the local grid. But these dams were built on borrowed time. Despite their importance, structural flaws were ignored for decades. The main issue? Loose sand sections within the dam's construction made it highly vulnerable to static liquefaction. For years, nothing was done. In May 2020, heavy rains battered Michigan for days, pushing both dams to their breaking point. The Edenville Dam started to give way, and when it collapsed, the devastation was instant and brutal. The flood tore through the landscape like a raging beast. Entire neighborhoods were swallowed up. More than 10,000 people were forced to flee their homes. The Tittabawassee River swelled to a record 35.05 feet, destroying roads, bridges, and anything that stood in its path. Damage estimates reached nearly $200 million, and legal battles erupted over who was responsible. A thorough investigation confirmed the disaster was caused by a combination of factors: poor construction practices, loose sand sections prone to liquefaction, lack of maintenance, and ignored warnings. This wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a catastrophe rooted in negligence. But Edenville was just the beginning. The next disaster on our list wasn't just a close call, it was a near-apocalyptic collapse. California's Oroville Dam is a monster of engineering. At 770 feet, 235 meters high, it's the tallest dam in the United States. Built between 1961 and 1968, this earth-filled dam holds back Lake Oroville, a massive reservoir with a storage capacity of 4.3 billion cubic meters. It was designed to provide water supply, flood control, and hydroelectric power generation. The dam's power plant, Edward Hyatt, located underground near the base of the dam, has a generating capacity of approximately 645 megawatts, producing around 1.4 billion kilowatt hours of electricity annually, enough to power approximately 600,000 homes. But all that power comes with a price. The dam was built with two spillways to manage water levels. One main spillway made of concrete with steel gates, and an emergency spillway. The emergency spillway was not just a hillside of bare soil. It was a concrete weir designed to release excess water over an unlined hillside during extreme flooding events. However, this feature was never meant to handle heavy, sustained water flow. The trouble began on February 7, 2017, after a series of heavy rainstorms drenched Northern California. Operators noticed an unusual flow pattern in the main spillway and, upon inspection, discovered a massive crater, about 250 feet wide and 50 feet deep, gouged out of the concrete, exposing the underlying bedrock. Despite this, engineers continued to release water down the damaged spillway at 55,000 cubic feet per second to prevent the reservoir from overflowing. But the rain kept coming and the water levels kept rising. By February 11th, Water began pouring over the emergency spillway for the first time in the dam's history. The uncontrolled flow of water over the unprotected hillside quickly caused erosion. Engineers noticed the hillside was eroding much faster than expected, threatening to undermine the concrete weir itself. A catastrophic failure that would release an uncontrollable wall of water.
Matt, good morning. Emergency personnel have been working through the night, keeping a very close eye on what they call a very fluid situation. Now, the dam itself here at Lake Oroville is structurally sound. It's that emergency spillway that is in jeopardy, and if it fails, communities downstream would be in serious trouble.
The emergency spillway at the Oroville Dam is this morning in its own state of emergency. Warning of an imminent failure and the potential of a catastrophic flood, state water officials ordered the immediate evacuation of 188,000 people.
Panic swept the region. Officials ordered an emergency evacuation of nearly 188,000 people downstream. It was pure chaos. Roads were clogged with cars, families were separated, and residents grabbed whatever belongings they could carry. The speed of the evacuation and the sheer number of people involved made it one of the largest evacuations in California's history. An investigation later found the disaster was caused by a long-term systemic failure to recognize and address inherent spillway design and construction weaknesses, poor foundation bedrock quality, and deteriorated service spillway chute conditions. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, had identified deficiencies in the dam's spillway capacity as early as 1998, but warnings were largely ignored. Repairing the spillways was a monumental task. More than 1,000 people worked over 2 million hours to rebuild the structures. The repairs included not only reconstructing the main spillway with stronger materials, but also bolstering the emergency spillway with a concrete buttress, an underground secant pile wall, and a splash pad to prevent future erosion if it's ever used again. Even today, the Oroville Dam remains a critical part of California's water system. But the lessons learned from the near catastrophe continue to shape how dams are monitored, repaired, and regulated across the United States. Now let's move on to another dam disaster that shook the world's confidence in modern engineering, the Mount Polley Tailings Dam failure. On August 4, 2014, the stillness of a remote mining area in British Columbia, Canada, was shattered by an unprecedented disaster. The Mount Polley mine, a large open-pit copper and gold mining operation, was about to become the scene of one of the worst environmental disasters in Canadian history. The tailings dam at Mount Polley wasn't like the others on our list. Instead of holding back a natural reservoir, it contained something far more dangerous, a thick, muddy sludge of mine waste known as tailings, filled with toxic chemicals and heavy metals. The Mount Polley Tailings Dam was raised by over 50 meters over 14 years as mining operations expanded. But that height came with a terrible cost. It had a modified centerline design, a method where the dam is built progressively outward, with each raise supported by the previous structure and external fill material. However, the underlying soil was weak and unstable, never meant to support such a massive structure. In the early hours of August 4, 2014, that weakness reached a breaking point. Without warning, the dam gave way, and when it failed catastrophically. The breach unleashed an estimated 25 billion liters of toxic sludge. The tidal wave of toxic waste tore through the landscape, turning the once peaceful Hazeltine Creek into a 150-meter wide scar, an unrecognizable muddy wasteland. The sludge spilled into Polley Lake, Edney Creek, and Quesnel Lake, waters rich with fish and wildlife. But this wasn't just water and mud. The breach contained lethal levels of heavy metals, including lead, cadmium, and arsenic. Investigations later revealed a chilling truth. The failure was caused by a design flaw. The soil beneath the dam was unstable, something that should have been identified long before the dam was even built. Yet inspections missed warning signs. For years, small structural problems were ignored while the dam kept growing taller and the risks kept getting worse. No lives were lost that day, but the environmental and economic impact was devastating. But if you think the worst is over, you're mistaken, because the next disaster on our list claimed hundreds of lives and shattered a nation's trust. Let's talk about the Brumadinho Dam collapse in Brazil. Brazil's mining industry is a titan of production, one of the largest iron ore suppliers in the world. But beneath that success lies a nightmare of negligence and greed. On January 25, 2019, at precisely 12:28 p.m., the earth trembled. A dam holding back a lethal mixture of mining waste suddenly collapsed. Within moments, a wall of thick, poisonous mud came thundering down at highway speeds. The Corrego do Feijó iron ore mine, operated by the giant corporation Vale SA, had used a type of structure known as an upstream tailings dam, a cheap but inherently risky design. Built to store iron ore waste, the dam held back a staggering 12 million cubic meters of sludge. And while the dam had been unused since 2015, it was far from safe. This was no remote failure. The mine sat just upstream from Brumadinho, a town of over 30,000 people. The wave of mud obliterated everything in its path. Mine headquarters, homes, farms, roads, and an entire cafeteria where workers were having lunch. Some victims were buried under meters of hardened mud, their bodies lost forever. The death toll? 270 lives, with dozens still missing to this day. The damage went beyond lives lost. Toxic mud spread across the Paraopá River, polluting water sources, destroying ecosystems, and ruining the livelihoods of those who depended on the river. Farmers, fishers, entire communities stripped of everything in an instant. But the most haunting part of this disaster? It was entirely preventable. Investigations revealed that Vale had known for years that the dam was unstable. Internal reports and safety audits repeatedly flagged critical risks, but rather than address those risks, the company continued operations as usual. Even as late as 2 weeks before the collapse, an engineering firm certified the dam as stable, a false assurance that cost hundreds of lives. But if you thought that was bad, the next disaster on our list wasn't just a structural failure, it was a crisis that threatened to wipe entire communities off the map. And this time, it wasn't a mining disaster, it was a hydroelectric megaproject meant to power a nation. This is Colombia, more precisely, the Hidroituango Dam on the Cauca River, an ambitious megaproject designed to become the nation's largest hydroelectric power plant. Designed as a 225-meter tall earth-fill embankment with a clay core, the dam would eventually have the capacity to generate 2,456 megawatts of power, enough to supply energy to over 17 million people. With its dam reservoir capable of holding 2.72 billion cubic meters of water, stretching over 36 square kilometers. However, building a project of this magnitude came with risks. The region's challenging terrain and susceptibility to landslides made construction a delicate balancing act. And in April 2018, that balance was shattered. It started with heavy rainfall, the kind that turns hillsides to mud and rivers into raging torrents. The intense rain triggered landslides that blocked the dam's primary diversion tunnels, the very channels meant to divert the river's flow during construction. Suddenly, the Cauca River had nowhere to go but up, swelling rapidly behind the incomplete dam. The situation spiraled out of control when water began escaping into a transit gallery used by construction vehicles, eroding the roadway and a portion of the riprap. A previously sealed tunnel unexpectedly reopened, unleashing a flood of water downstream. Within hours, nearly 25,000 residents from riverside communities were forced to evacuate. The threat of a catastrophic dam collapse loomed over the region. An investigation later revealed the disaster's root causes. The project had ignored critical geological assessments, underestimated the region's landslide risk, and failed to implement proper safety measures. But Hidroituango wasn't the only tragedy to rattle the dam industry. On the other side of the world, another hydroelectric titan would face a disaster that would shake the very foundations of modern engineering. Russia's Sayano-Shushenskaya Dam is a massive concrete structure. Built on the Yenisei River in Siberia, this colossal hydroelectric power station stands 242 meters tall and stretches over a kilometer across, making it the largest hydro plant in Russia. Completed in 1978, the dam was designed to generate an impressive 6,400 megawatts of power. Inside, 10 gigantic turbines worked tirelessly to produce electricity, powering everything from cities to industrial complexes. Its foundations were solid. Its construction was hailed as a triumph, but as the years passed, flaws began to show. Years of poor maintenance had been slowly degrading the infrastructure. Turbine 2 in particular had been vibrating for years, a problem engineers had tried to patch up rather than fix properly. And then, on August 17, 2009, disaster struck. A sudden mechanical failure in turbine 2 caused a massive pressure surge. In an instant, the turbine cover was torn apart and a jet of water exploded from the penstock with the force of a bomb. Metal bolts snapped like twigs, and a torrent of water ripped through the powerhouse, tearing the roof apart and flooding the entire area. It was pure chaos. 75 workers lost their lives that day, their bodies swept away or crushed by debris. One worker was never found. Investigations later revealed the real problem: long-term neglect. Warnings about Turbine 2 had been ignored for years, with maintenance schedules pushed aside in favor of keeping the plant running. The incident was declared a technical and organizational disaster that could have been prevented if proper inspections and repairs had been made. But if you think Russia's disaster was horrifying, our next story takes us to Uzbekistan, where a dam failure triggered a flood so devastating it crossed international borders. In the heart of Uzbekistan's Sidavo region lies the Sadoba Reservoir, a massive water storage facility completed in 2017. Designed to hold 922 million cubic meters of water, the reservoir was intended to irrigate vast agricultural lands and boost local farming productivity. Standing 30 meters tall, the earth-filled dam was a symbol of modern engineering aimed at transforming the region's agriculture. However, beneath its impressive facade, the dam harbored critical vulnerabilities. On May 1, 2020, after a week of relentless heavy rainfall and severe storms, disaster struck. At approximately 5:55 a.m., a section of the dam's western wall collapsed, unleashing a torrent of water onto the surrounding landscape. Villages, cotton fields, and infrastructure were inundated within moments. The human impact was profound. Over 70,000 people were evacuated from their homes in Uzbekistan and neighboring Kazakhstan. Tragically, 6 individuals lost their lives and dozens were injured. The floodwaters ravaged more than 35,000 hectares of land, destroying homes, displacing families, and causing extensive damage to infrastructure. Investigations into the catastrophe revealed alarming findings. Despite being a relatively new structure, the dam exhibited significant structural weaknesses. Satellite data analysis indicated ongoing differential settlement and deformation in the dam's structure prior to the collapse, suggesting that early warning signs were either unnoticed or ignored. The Sadoba Reservoir disaster serves as a stark reminder of the critical importance of rigorous engineering standards, regular maintenance, and transparent oversight in large-scale infrastructure projects. It underscores the devastating human and environmental consequences that can arise when these elements are compromised. We've just explored some of the worst dam disasters in modern history, events where human error, negligence, and nature's fury combine to create unimaginable devastation. These tragedies were not just failures of infrastructure, they were failures of foresight, planning, and accountability. And while each disaster led to improvements and changes, the underlying question remains. Are we taking dam safety seriously enough? Or is it only a matter of time before another disaster strikes? Share your thoughts in the comments and make sure to like, share and subscribe for more Mega Build stories.